what other shit we do to record?
I think, isn't it just recording?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. So this one's on Unity 2018.3.2. Doesn't matter. I did it last night with Unity 10.2.3.1. 3.3.
Let's stream first. Oh, you're already.
Yeah, it's too late. It'll figure itself out. What's the worst that can happen? What?
I don't know for sure, I don't think it matters, you're fine, don't worry. I love you.
What's up?
So basically, every time you want to use Photon in the project, you have to import Photon into the project, or is it once you download the Photon app from the Unity?
No, you have to import it.
Just once, right?
No, you have to import it into every project. But you don't have to do it every time you open Unity. You just do it. So, for all of you who don't know, Photon is basically a server for Unity. It's going to host your games. I'm going to quote unquote host. It's going to do matchmaking and it's going to set up. But there are still clients that have to host your games.
Yeah, trust me, they're not important. They're not the most important.
Alright. Cool. So we are in Unity, and this is a really ugly layout. Alright, cool. So we're going to start out, and we're going to open our asset store, because Photon 2 is an asset, so we're going to install Photon 2. Make sure you install the free version.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be this one. Photon 2, Pun 2 free. Pun is just Photon Unity Networking. They like to abbreviate it for some reason. But we're going to download it and install it.
It's funny.
It is pretty funny. Oh god. Let's just skip that. So now I want to download.
Oh my god. You okay? I forgot to share, didn't have it back.
Oh.
That would have been bad.
Don't die.
Please don't.
We're not liable, but also don't die.
Oh. Okay.
I'm just gonna take this chair instead. So that way we can do that again. Oh. Get the shit out of me.
Hey, we got it. All right. So does everyone have Unity running? They have scene open and they have downloaded Pun.
I'm importing.
Yeah. It's good. I downloaded this February 8th, 2019. What was that?
There we go.
All right, cool.
Now we're for
So we're gonna import.
actually, first we did
So
we'll see where we are.
when you import Photon, it's going to ask you for a user ID. So everyone now, we're also going to have to now go to the Photon Engine website and get an app ID. So the idea is that Photon keeps track of your game by assigning it a unique ID so that it knows which servers to match people on, because obviously it doesn't want to match people with different games. So the website's photonengine.com, and I already have it open. But you guys are going to have to make accounts, and you're going to have to set up new applications. You can just Google Photon Engine, and it should give you the correct thing.
Oh, that's right, because the stage still has, the stage still probably is trying to load this up. Really? What's the issue? And why is it?
Because everyone found the website.
It's not a no issue.
It's this one, right?
It doesn't care what anything.
It should be Photon Engine.
Cares about text in there. And if Windows not running, then it should be doing it. Yeah. Let's set that file.
It should not be charging you money. If it's charging you money, it's the wrong website. Well, yeah.
This is the stage here. Oh, here. request for review.
Search for Control F. And then you have a bunch of greater than symbol. That's where you do something new design.
I opened that a while ago.
Okay. Does anyone have any issues? Is everyone on their dashboard, quote unquote? Does everyone have the big button that says create a new app? Does anyone not have that? Click that.
Honestly, the only problem is that we just haven't gotten an email yet.
Yeah, they're obnoxiously slow.
That checks.
We can kind of do stuff in Unity without an app ID kind of right now, but so let's just kind of forge ahead and assume that you kind of have an app ID. You can enter it later. So if we go back to Unity, we're going to come back to our import page, where it's going to ask us if we want to import all this random stuff. I'm just going to say yes for all of this. It's actually pretty good reference material for like what you can do and what's like legal to do within, so I kind of keep it. But you can get rid of it if you really don't want it. So I'm just going to import it all. And once it imports, it's going to ask us for an app ID. If you don't have one yet, you kind of just skip this step and we can put it in later when we talk about the settings. But for now, just kind of import everything. Alright, so I've just created a new application. Make sure that's type of Photon pun, so it can connect the players, and you'll see here, it'll give you a new app ID. I'm going to take this app ID, I'm just going to copy it, and once Unity is done importing my assets from the asset store, it's going to ask me to set up the app ID. Make sure to type pun too. Oh, yeah. Alright, so now that I'm done importing, it's going to ask me to enter my app ID. If you guys don't have it right now, you can kind of just skip it. We can enter it in later. Alright, so, and it's going to update basically your Photon server settings, which we're going to talk about later, but it's going to enter it in here. Alright, let's move on and talk about menus. So, we're going to basically, in this workshop, be creating a menu. So I want everyone to make a new scene, and we're going to create a network manager. What did I call it in my slides? Network connection handler. It doesn't really have to be we just need a script that we can talk to. And we're going to hook up buttons to it, so we're going to deal with that. Do I have VS Code? Ah, yes, I have VS Code. Lovely, alright.
So now make sure everything's working.
So, biggest part of using Photon is we're going to have to import photon.pun. Is everyone at this step, or should I wait up a little bit?
Can you wait up a little bit?
Okay.
So, how do you open VS Code?
Huh?
I can't believe I
So just make a new game object and give it some random name. I called it network connection handler.
Yeah,
You can do whatever you want.
3D object, or
It doesn't really matter. Just create an empty one.
Thank you so fucking much.
It's basically going to be doing nothing but
Oh, but
connecting
okay,
us, so we don't
this
actually
is cool
need an
because this
instance
is
for
now,
this.
in the testing, the player's looking for the savings. Cool, but this actually works. Thank you.
Yeah,
Holy
for
shit.
now, just remember to do a git pull and a git push.
Oh, yeah, let's do that. I don't need to commit, right?
Just work on it. The reverse
questions along this point? We're all on the same page. We've created a new scene. We have a game object within it, and we have a script that we can play with.
And like you added a script, right?
Yeah.
I just a generic script or?
Yeah, I just called it network connection handler. It doesn't really matter.
fucked around with
We're basically gonna be deleting everything within it anyways.
I mean, like, I was, okay, what happened? It became a big problem when I tried to do a commit, and then I started having more issues, and then I started
Okay,
trying
anyone
to
not
adjust them
here?
blindly, like,
We all have our script open?
It was something
Hey, cool.
conflict.
We're gonna be playing with using Photon.pun, so I've added that at the top, and we're gonna change our inheritance chain from monobehavior to monobehavior pun callbacks.
I can't even completely like from step to step remember exactly what I did and what. I'm sorry. I actually have to be
So the point of monobehavior pun callbacks is that it's gonna let pun call a bunch of callback methods for us basically. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it's gonna call us things like when we connect to the server, when players join our game. We're gonna get a bunch of things because you know how normally in monobehavior we have callbacks like awake, update, you know, start. I forget all of them. Like on trigger, enter. We have a bunch of them. But basically what's happening is that Unity is calling these methods on our objects so that it can tell us when things happen. The same is going to be true when we inherit from monobehavior pun callbacks, but they're going to be network behaviors as well. But because it's still a monobehavior, we're still going to get a bunch of these monobehavior callbacks too. So we're going to add a bunch of stub methods so that what we're creating here is a connection handler. What it's going to do is it's going to connect to Photon's server, and then it's going to try and match us with other players. So what we want here is we want awake, start, and we're going to create a new private method called connect to network, which is going to connect our actual game to the network itself. And then we're going to make a public one called try to join game, which is just going to try to join a game. Let's kill these.
Our script team somewhat, it's, instead of having to assign artists to teams, you have to pay any art, they go there, they almost assign right there. Yeah.
Alright, is everyone here? Do we have anyone still typing? God, the screen is dying more and more every day, isn't it? Jesus. Alright, everyone here? Anyone still typing? Alright, cool. We're gonna move on. So basically, what we want to do is when this game object awakes in the scene, well I guess it starts in the scene, it's gonna try and connect to the network. So we're just gonna be calling our other method in here. And then in awake, which is gonna happen before start, we're going to set a Boolean option in Photon, which is basically, it's called automatically sync scene. It's pretty self-explanatory. What happens is that Photon makes sure that all clients that are connected into the same room are on the same scene. So this is determined by whoever is the master client, but we're just going to call this. Everyone got those two? IntelliSense might not work because Photon is very unhappy all the time. I don't know why. But it doesn't like auto-completing Photon stuff. Alright. And then let's make sure that we're actually connecting. So connect to network is what it's going to do is it's going to take our game and it's going to query the Photon network that we've passed in the app ID for. So, and it's going to ask it to try and connect and make sure that we can see available rooms and games. So in Photon terms, what we have is we have the network itself, which we connect to, and then we can tell it that we want to create a room or join a room. There's also lobbies, but I'm not quite exactly sure what the difference between a lobby and a room is. But rooms are basically just connections where everyone is connected within a game. And then the network itself just has a bunch of rooms that you can create and add. And then, so what we're gonna do is first we're gonna make sure Photon network.isConnected is a Boolean within Photon network that's basically asks the network if we're already connected to it. So obviously if we're already connected to it, there's no reason to connect to it again. So we're just gonna check if we do that. And then we're gonna connect using settings. I'll explain what that is on the next slide.
Yeah. That they're already.
Okay. Game is compiling. Alright. Everyone here? Coolio. Alright. So connect using settings is basically going to use, we already have something that's defining all of the settings with which we're connecting to Photon. When we created the app ID, it's going to add it to our Photon settings. So you can see in the project menu here, it might already be open, but if you navigate to Photon Unity Network Resources, we're going to have something called Photon Server Settings, which is just going to hold a bunch of our server settings. If you set up the app ID earlier, it's going to populate it already here in app ID real time. You can add a bunch of other settings. There's app ID chat if you want to use their chat room software. App version, which is for if you want to make sure that users of different versions of the game aren't able to matchmake with one another, because obviously if you make an update and two games are running different logics, the games aren't going to work. So you can use the app version to make sure that that doesn't happen. Name server, fixed region, server. This is all kind of networking stuff. Something else that we want to change in here is we want to change network logging. Currently it's on error. Set it to all. This kind of gets annoying later if you're doing a lot of debugging. You might want to set it later, but let's just see what happens right now. So if we try and run the game right now, what's going to happen is it's going to call connect, and it's going to set up a bunch of networking stuff. Whoa. Wow, that's a lot more stuff than happens on my machine. But we're seeing that stuff is actually happening, right? So hypothetically, we've connected to Photon. Can everyone on their scene and see that something is happening at the very least? You guys save your files. Do you guys have the correct import to make sure that you're using Photon.hunt? Does it even compile? Yeah. Compile. Why not? set up your app ID? Do you have that? Yeah. Copy paste that. Just copy. Go back here. Go to edit.
Hello.
Paste your app ID. Alright, anyone else having problems? Everyone's good?
Yeah, I'm still having the compile error. Although I think one thing that happened is when I imported the Photon in, it didn't give me the window. Like oh, okay. Well, I put the ID in like that. It's probably like that. Oh, like, oh, you mean that one? Okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna move forward while you're trying to do that. Alright, so we set up full logging, blah blah blah. Some other useful things is OPC list, which is the very bottom one. I'm not gonna get into this right now, but there should be 3 already from your imports, but that's kind of like, don't worry about those right now. Basically, Photon, when it calls RPCs on your clients, it caches basically every RPC that can be called and references them by string name. So this will give you a list of every RPC that you could possibly call. So right now there should be 3 because of our imports, but more will be added later if you use them yourself. Alright, this is what I got on my home machine after running. Here you can actually see that it's doing ping checks against every Photon network across the world, apparently. So you can see that I have like 250 ping in India, I think. Anyways. Alright. So now that we've connected to the network, let's make sure that we can actually join a game. So here, we're going to do the opposite check of last time. Last time we checked if Photon network is not connected. Now we're going to check if we are connected, because we shouldn't be able to try and join a game if we're not already connected to the network. Alright. Everyone here? Sorry, I'm going a little faster than a lot of stuff covered. But everyone good here. So what this is going to try and do is it's going to query our Photon network and it's going to say, are there any rooms open? And if there are, give me a random one and I'm going to try and join it. Obviously I don't think it's going to work if they have passwords or like any of that nonsense that you normally find in lobby making games, but for this example, if we only ever have one lobby, this is just going to give us whatever game is open currently. Alright, and now we get to actually call our method. So we have this public method that we've created. So let's create a new button that lets us call this. So I'm just going to put it right in the middle of the screen. Be all ugly. Beautiful button. Text, let's just call it connect. Let's just call it play. Alright, and then in our button, real quick, let's add our method to its onClick. God, I cannot see. Alright. So what I just did is I created a button, I changed the text that it says play now, and then on the on click in the button, I've added a new listener, and it's going to call the try to join game on our network handler. Is everyone up to date with that?
Wait, which function?
It's going to try and call connection handler dot try to connect game, or try to join game, whatever I called it. Try and call this. So you can just drag in your game object that has the script on it into the button, and then make sure that you choose the right script and choose the right method. Is everyone here? Anyone not here?
I'm new to Unity, sorry.
What'd you set up before? So you created the button. What did you expect?
I just went to the text, changed the text to play, so that it lovely says play on it. And then above it in the button itself, you're going to scroll down to the button script, and on click, you're going to click plus. It's going to add a new handler. You're going to drag, you can just drag in your network connection handler, and then you go to network connection handler and try to join game. Obviously I have to delete this because I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm assuming it didn't look like this unless. Yeah, like it just doesn't actually work. It says that line is wrong, but it's not wrong. Like, don't actually sending it successfully. I don't know that I actually did some work.
Still not meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, I did input the ID.
Alright, I'm moving back to move on. Alright, so hypothetically, now that we have connected our button to call this method. If we click on it, literally nothing's going to happen, because what's happening right now is that it's trying to join a random room, but obviously because we're the only ones in the network, there's no room to join. So it's going to try and join a random room and just fail. So we're going to try and fix this. Okay. Right, done. Alright, so we're gonna add a new import, and we're gonna add 4 new methods. These are the callbacks that I was talking about when we inherited from my behavior Pun callbacks. These are only 4. There's like a bajillion others. There's like on client connected, on client disconnected, on joined room failed, there's a bajillion of them. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to call unconnected to master, which lets us know when we've connected to the network itself. On disconnected, which is called when a client leaves for some reason, or like just leaves our game. On join random failed, which lets us know when we call try to join a random room and it doesn't actually join a random room. It'll tell us. And then on joined room lets us know whenever we join a room. So, make sure that you import photon.realtime at the top. This is only important because on disconnected takes a disconnect cause, which for some reason is in that namespace. I'm going to wait a little bit because I'm sure you guys have a million things to type. But once you've typed all these in, just go into the Unity inspector and make sure that it compiles. That way you'll know that they're all correct. Because they're not just override, it should give you a compiler error if there's nothing to override. So make sure they're all public overrides, because basically we're overriding callback functions in the parent. There's a lot of type. All of this is going to be posted on GitHub anyways, so don't worry too much about getting it all. Play through that. Oh, it should be trying. Crash.
I have a very old version of Unity, so it's... Wait, it's 2018? Yeah. I know. But my Unity seems to be cracking out whenever I use this version of Unity. I don't know.
How are we doing on time? Shit. Okay, it's better than my laptop for some reason. For some ungodly reason, if I resize any of the windows, the whole window just goes black.
It goes black.
Like if I like move the window a little bit bigger, it just goes black, and then it just crashes, and I don't know why.
Oh, it's just GTX. Yeah, I know. That's why
You guys got all the... I mean, you can change the text. Same play, that's what I did. If you open up the button.
I've seen artists have that reaction.
On the screen. Separate text.
Not necessarily it's like the main body text, but just like the stylistic font.
The middle one. Very middle one. Alright, everyone good on the methods? I'm just going to add debugs to all these methods with basically the method names so that we know them when they're actually being called. Just real quick. No. Don't do that. Alright, I'm just going to add all these debugs.
Oh, thank God it actually works. Yes, no, it just needed to be re-imported. I think
Funky.
something screwed up. The first several times I imported it.
Alright. They don't have to be perfect. I don't really care. It doesn't matter spelling. It's just so that we can see in the inspector when these things are getting called so that we can kind of debug if things aren't going right. So I'm just going to real quick test in the editor. That's not the editor. That's the editor. Alright, so in our console, we can see on connected to master, which lets us know that we've connected to the Unity master. I don't know what all of these incoming commands are. It's kind of annoying. I may disable full. Let's disable full logging. Oh, network logging. Pun logging, that's the one. I clicked on the wrong one. Alright, let's do that one. Alright, there we go. There it's pinging all the servers. Alright, so we can see on connected to master is called. And if we click the play button, we should see on join random room failed. Because we failed to join a random room. So, that is Firefox. Alright, so now we're gonna, if we fail to join a random room, we can pretty reasonably assume that we have, well, because in on try to join a random room, we check if we're connected to the network. If we're connected to the network and we can't find a room, we can pretty reasonably assume that we need to create a room because there's no one playing. So what we're going to do is on join random failed, we're going to create a room. So we're going to call Photon network, create room, passing it in null. I can't actually remember what these parameters mean. I just know that room options is, I think it's name. And I'm just passing in null. Okay. So we're creating a default room, no room options, no name, I believe, is the first parameter. And so now, if we play our game, it should hopefully still compile. We've connected to master. We failed to join a random game, but then we join a room. Because when we create the room, we join it automatically. So we create the room and we join the room. So now we have a single player multiplayer experience. Alright, so we've basically created our menu right now. So what's going to happen is if two players play the game, one of them is going to click play and it's going to create a room. The second one's going to click play and it's going to find this room and connect to it. Hypothetically, this is, this is hopefully how it should be working. There are some buggy things about latency. But alright, let's save our scene real quick. Let's just call it menu. Actually save it in our scene folder. Let's call it menu. And let's go into a new scene. Alright. So now we're going to create a game scene. And in our game scene, let's create a new player object. So hypothetically, we can see our player. So I'm just going to create a new empty object. I'm going to call it player. I'm going to give it a scale of 3, 3, 3, just so we can see it. Give it a sprite render. And let's give it a, let's just make it the default UI sprite. Alright, we have a beautiful little player right here. Alright, now back in our project settings, let's go into our assets, and let's create a new folder. This folder is going to be called resources. You have to spell this exactly correctly. It has to be spelled resources. Resources, if you don't know, it's very important in networking for reasons, but it's more important, but also basically whatever's in the resources folder is going to be loaded by Unity when the game starts. If you put things in a prefab folder, when you spawn prefabs into the scene, Unity has to load them first. But resources folders, everything is loaded when the game starts. So it's important for networking because prefabs can be different across two clients, so you need to load them at the beginning so that they're all the same. Okay, so we have a resources folder. Let's drag our player into our resources folder. And basically, he's just a prefab, but he's in the resources folder. Put in a resources folder. Let's delete him from our scene, because he doesn't need to be here anymore. Is anyone not caught up to this point? We have a player, we have a sprite render, and we have resources.
Did you create an object, like 3D object for us?
I just created an empty object and stuck a sprite render on it. Oh, we're running out of time. Here's my player. It's just the UI sprite, scale of 3x3, named player. Doesn't really matter, we can add behavior to them later. We're probably not going to get to that today, but hypothetically. Everybody caught up? And he's got to be inside the resources folder, otherwise we're not going to be able to spawn him. Well, actually for now, it doesn't really matter, but later it will matter. Because we're probably not going to get to the point where we can spawn him correctly. Alright, everyone up to here? Cool. Let's keep going. Alright, let's create a new game object, same as before, but this time we're going to call him Network Game Manager. I don't know, there's a lot of things to call things. Alright, so let's create a new game object, new empty object, call him Network Game Manager. And let's attach a new script to him, also called Network Game Manager, just to keep things simple. So, empty game object, attach a script to him called Network Game Manager, or whatever you want to call it. And we're going to play with him in our script now. Empty game object, Network Game Manager, make a new script called Network Game Manager. Everyone here able to edit the script? Alright. Network Game Manager. So we're going to set it up as before. Basically, he needs to be able to list our pun callbacks, and obviously he needs to import pun so that he can do that. So we're just going to say using Photon.pun, and he's going to listen to our mono behavior pun callbacks. Easy peasy. Let's kill these. I don't need these right now. Everyone here, empty class. All we've added is the using, and we've made him a inherit from mono behavior pun callback. Alright, from here, we need to spawn, we need to get a reference to our player object. So we have that prefab from before, so we need to expose this to the inspector and make sure that he knows what to spawn. So what we're going to do is, we're also going to add a public static game object local player instance. It's very useful to keep track of your player once you've spawned him, because otherwise you may never find him again. So let's keep track of him. So we're going to add a public static game object. Let's call him local player instance. I don't know how to spell, this keyboard is weird. And let's create a public game object of our player prefab. And let's just save that real quick. And let's go back here, and we can see in the inspector that we now have a field that we can put our player prefab in. So from the resources folder where you put him before and saved him, drag him into the player prefab. So now our network game manager knows what he's spawning when he tries to spawn a flame. Real quick. What are you looking for? We're running out of time, so I'm going to have to go a little faster. So let's create, did I make it an awake or a start? Let's make the start method, which spawns our player in. We're going to create our player prefab. We're going to put him at Alright, so we're just going to assign our local player instance to the instantiation of our player prefab at 0, 0, normal rotation. So basically he's just going to spawn in the middle and do nothing. Alright, so when we enter our scene on awake, our network game manager is going to spawn a player and sit him down. Right in the middle. Alright, so now that we've done this, let's go back to our network connection handler, which was in our previous scene. And what happens is when we connect to a room, we want to make sure that we move to our game scene. So actually, first before we do this, let's save this scene and call it game scene. Alright, so now we have our game scene. So once we have our game scene, we have to do something magical in here. And once we've joined the room, what we want to do is we want to Photon network, Photon network.load level. So this is kind of similar to if you've loaded level with the scene manager. But here, we're explicitly telling the Photon network that we want to change our scene. So hypothetically, with automatically sync scene, they should make sure that all players are in the same scene. So we Photon network.load level, and we load our game scene. So now, if we want to do some quick testing, if we go back to our menu scene, and we run it, and we click play, well, nothing happens. Normally I do a QA where I tell them why nothing happened, but for right now, you can't load a scene from Photon until you've added it to the build. So I don't know if you guys have run into this normally with single player games, but you can't load scenes that you haven't added to the build index because Unity technically doesn't know about it. So what we need to do is in File, Build Settings, you're going to see the scenes in the build, which currently are going to be none. So we need to take our menu and our sample scene, and we need to drag them into the build. If it'll let me do that. Make sure that your menu scene is on top, because when you're in a build, you want the menu scene to load first. So you want it to make it index 0. So now that we have these two scenes in the build, huh?
Open your build setting again.
My build settings. What did I do?
The second line, but it's not again.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. Thank you. Alright. So now when we play our game, hypothetically, click the button, and we go into our new scene, and we can see our beautiful players and spawn in the middle. Love. Alright. I gotta go real quick because we have like 4 minutes left. We've added our scenes to the build settings. And then let's do something real quick. I think I'm just going to have to run through this real quick because I don't know if we have time for the rest of it, but this is the very end. But what I'm going to be doing here is I want to prove to you guys that this is actually a networked scene. So what I'm doing here is just real quick, before we run out of time, if you're the starting player, it's going to spawn you on the left, and if you're not the starting player, it's going to spawn you on the right. So right now, I'm just doing that just so I can show you guys that they spawn in different places. So I'm going to build this real quick, if it'll let me. And let's create a new folder in our scene. Let's just call it build. And let's make a build in there. So hypothetically, what we've set up is that you can try to create a room, try to join a room, and then once you're in a room, it's going to move you into a new scene where the players are slightly different, although we haven't implemented much player behavior. So I told you guys we're not going to get to many good practices. Even this is pretty bad. We shouldn't be using instantiate, but we'll get to that when we come to it. Unfortunately, the only way to actually test networked code is to build, because Unity hates me, personally. Alright, so if we build and run our game real quick, and we hit play, alright, we spawn on the left. Now if we join our game from the other side, we should spawn on the right. So see, you can see that one spawns on the left, one spawns on the right. So hypothetically, we're in the same scene. Next week, I'll have to explain to you why we can't see each other or move or do anything interesting. But this should be proof that we can be in the same scene. So let's talk about why we can't the players see each other, what actually just happened, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of things that I skipped, and there's a lot of bad things that I did. We shouldn't be using instantiate. That's one of the reasons that we can't see each other, and a bunch of things. But basically what we just did is we created a room where 2 players can join. On both players' local instances, the network game manager that we created is going to spawn a player. But they can't see each other because they've only been spawned on the local instance, and the server has no idea about the other player. So we're spawning it locally, but they're not replicated. Nothing is replicated, the sprites aren't replicated, the positions are replicated. The other client doesn't even know that the other player's been spawned. So we're in the same scene, and we can set up things that we can, so that we can hypothetically replicate these things. But for now, that's all we can do. I hate you, everyone. Do we have any questions? I know I went really fast at the end. I'm sorry. I'm going to post both the slides and a GitHub link that has the full complete project so that you guys can get up to date with what I just did. But does anyone have any real quick questions that don't have to do with really fast at the end? Everyone good? Alright. For next week, I'm going to be basically doing, make sure that players can see each other and that they can move, hopefully. And maybe we can get, depending on how much material I can get through, we'll see what kind of fun stuff we can do. Do you guys have any suggestions about what you guys want to see next week? Nothing? My curriculum?
Just a calc Two players shoot each other.
Two players shoot each other. It shouldn't be too bad. So we'll see how far we can get next week.
Okay.
But hypothetically, that would be a good game. Let's just make a small like top-down shoot.
Yeah.
All right. All right. I'll see you guys next week. What's up?
I don't know, like, I just got rid of this